Today, I'm interviewing Darren Fike. He's the CEO and founder of Sante. He's going after an absolutely incredible market that's been left in the dust that's really big, a lot bigger than I actually thought, liquor stores. He goes into a whole host of topics that were incredibly eye-opening for me, including how he's built a really effective sales team and go-to-market motion, how he's using AI to actually get people to rip and replace their systems of record. That is one of the biggest problems founders face. I know I did, getting people to move off their legacy systems, and he's using agents to make it seamless. It's an incredible playbook that I hadn't even thought of yet. This is a really fun conversation about transforming kind of sneaky large industries that are stuck in the past. Let's get into it. All right, welcome back to Verticals. We got a really special guest today. I got Darren Fike, who's the founder and CEO of Sante. He's attacking a sneaky big industry that's kind of been hidden in plain sight. So we're excited today. We're not going to have Nick join us. Nick and I are experimenting a little bit with some one-on-one based conversations. So if you're here for Nick, I'm sorry, he won't be with us today, but you're here really for Darren. And so Darren, if you don't mind, give us a quick background. Tell us what you're building.
Yeah. So thanks for having me. Excited to be here. A listener of the pod since the first episode, and I've found a lot of value in it. So very humbled to be here. So Sante, and for the record, correcting the pronunciation of the name, it's a French word. So Sante is essentially cheers in French. And so we're building a complete operating system for wine and liquor stores. And so wine and liquor stores it's an $80 billion market with the majority of these shops being owned by independent businesses. So about 90% of the market is independently owned and operated. And so we can get into this throughout the conversation, but there are state regulations, prohibition era laws that make it difficult for corporate chains to exist in alcohol retail. And so what we're doing is building this operating system that's purpose-built for the modern era of retail. And so on one side, that's replacing like legacy incumbent, outdated point of sale systems that really only deliver like cash register functions, like adding and subtracting taxes, adding and subtracting inventory. And then we're going a layer deeper with doing things to help these stores grow. And so the focus here at Sante, beyond like table stakes functionality, like making sure that they can maintain operations, is like delivering them modern commerce tools that help them generate more revenue. So things like an e-commerce platform. We have a marketing platform that uses agents to essentially like send email and SMS campaigns on the store's behalf. We have like integrations with the top delivery app services. So think like DoorDash, Uber Eats. And then we also provide like a full suite of loyalty program functionality that you can offer to shoppers that like keep them coming back. So it's like tailor-made for wine and liquor stores to help them bring customers into the store and to their website to make more money. And then on the admin side, so more for like the back office functions, we also have some really cool like AI tools that we deliver mostly to store owners and managers that like save them a lot of time and allow them to operate with like either like leaner headcount, spending less on payroll, or just like spending less time on like annoying work that keeps them from, growing the business or spending time at home.
Awesome. Very cool. And I have two-part question here. So why liquor stores? Like what, why did you decide to attack this problem? And then second, I'm sure you got this question in every single like VC meeting, but why can't like the Toasts of the world kind of take this on? I know you mentioned regulation, but maybe go a little bit deeper there.
Yeah. So let's talk about the why liquor market first. So I think that the hidden insight in the liquor store market is that if you look at the average revenue per store in the industry, it's orders of magnitude higher than most other verticals in retail, or like what we say most other verticals on Main Street. So your average liquor store does about 2.5 million in annual sales per year. And if you look at like restaurants, for example, independent restaurants are about 1 million per location. You look at like barbershops, nail salons, like 500,000 to 600K. So the liquor store market is while it's like a niche market, these stores individually are much more complex operations just from the sense of how many transactions that they're doing a year. And given that like we've been in the payment processing game since day one, I could talk a little bit about my background and why that relates here, but we've been in the payment processing game since day one. And so the volume of processing volume per store is like very important to how we're able to scale this business. And so today we're in enabling consumer payments. Tomorrow we're in enabling B2B payments. And you could see how like, well, if you're doing 2.5 million in credit card transactions a year per location, then that means you're also spending a lot of money upstream to wholesalers to buy those goods to bring them into the store. So it's just, they're just simply bigger operations. The way that I got into it was honestly like was a little strange, or maybe happenstance is a better way to put it. So I've spent my career working in a variety of different venture-backed startups. My first role as a seller was at an ad tech company during like the ad tech boom in like 2015, 2016. And after that, found my way into fintech, working at like, different payments and embedded finance companies. And coming out of those experiences, whenever I was intentional about founding a company, I was looking at a variety of different spaces, and just being somebody who's like into wine in their personal life, had stumbled on like how outdated these wine shops and liquor stores are just by being in a state of curiosity. And like one thing led to another, and I actually ended up working at a liquor store in a neighborhood around the corner from my apartment in my neighborhood in New York City. And like 6 months into doing that, it became like abundantly clear, like these are like incredibly outdated. They're resource strapped. They're not doing anything to grow. They're using either like old systems that are like shackles around their ankles, or generic systems that don't solve industry specific problems. And so I came out of that with like real strong conviction on what we need to do, which gets into your second question, which around like, why can't like a Square or Toast do this? I think it's really important to understand like alcohol is a controlled substance, but it's the only controlled substance that's not federally regulated. It's like CBD, THC, even things like ketamine that are making their ways into like med spas. There's like federally regulated products. Alcohol is regulated at the state level, and these prohibition era laws basically like allow or require that states mandate their own regulations around how liquor is acquired or how alcohol is acquired at the wholesale level, and then how it's sold to the consumer. So that's like tax rules. Do you have to charge based on, is it a carbonated drink? Do you charge a different tax based on the category that it's in? Do you have to charge a different tax rate or a different fee based on the county that you're delivering to? Maybe you're existing county A and you're delivering to county B, and that requires a different fee that you charge to the consumer. So these state regulations create like a more complicated industry to operate in as a retailer. And so when you're thinking about Square, Clover, Lightspeed, Toast, great companies, but I always come back to like the Gmail comparison. Like Gmail, like tens of millions of people are using it. If you're a superhuman user, or even like you use like a Gmail plugin, it's like, why wouldn't Gmail just offer this to everyone? It's like, is that really worth throwing off the core business? Like, how many support tickets would you have from being prompted to set up complex tax rules that you don't need to set up as like somebody who operates a farm stand or a barbershop? And so I think that the tax regulations are a big aspect of this. And I would say like the second thing, to be brief here, is you have to really be in the trenches with these customers to understand other nuances that they need to be able to switch to a platform like Sante. And I also just think it's like a pretty big lift to expect like a product team at a big company to deliver on that as well.
Awesome. No, it's super interesting. And we've seen the verticalization of verticals kind of really take an effect. It was I think that's actually going to be a trend that continues to happen with, the slices of the world, right? Alir got that question 1,000 times. And so you're really in a separate category, which I think is fascinating. I want to go back to, you talked about, I didn't realize how much more revenue is flowing through these shops. If you can, so let's talk about like the early days, right? For founders that are just getting started or really trying to figure out what vertical to go after, why, like, obviously you had experience, kind of boots on the ground, working in one of these. Outside of the order volume, like in kind of these legacy pieces, like what was like all right, I'm doing this, I'm going for it. And then where did you begin? How did you think about like initial product suite or just initial product if you kind of did the wedge process?
Whenever I took the job at this liquor store in Tribeca, I'd asked the owner, and I told the owner, I'm pretty serious about potentially building in this space. And so I want like the most complex problems. And so one of the first jobs I was given was entering invoices into the Square point of sale system. And we were using Square at that shop. And so while entering invoice data isn't industry specific, in the liquor industry, because there's like two things that make this industry specific. Number one is there's like a 3-tier system that exists. So like the producers of the goods can't sell directly to the retailers in most cases. Like some small wineries can and breweries can, but like Tito's doesn't sell directly to stores. There's like an intermediary. And because of these intermediaries, it's like there's this layer of, they're called distributors, and they have portfolios of business that fragment who you buy the wholesale goods from. And so a convenience store may have 5 or 6 different suppliers, and that's because they're buying directly from like Frito-Lay, Mondelez, PepsiCo, et cetera. Whereas liquor stores are like, I'd say the average is about 25 distributor relationships, and on the high end, it's over 50 to 60. And so not only are you dealing with a lot of distributors, and so that means different orders that you're putting into the system, you're also, going back to the point that these are majority independently owned and operated, they're like have tighter cash flows. So they can't go and be like, I'm going to buy every popular product in bulk for 3 months. Maybe one product they'll go and buy in bulk for 3 months. But everything else, they're ordering and receiving on a weekly or biweekly basis. And so those two things combined means that like you're getting these like deliveries from your distributors every day, quite literally 5 days a week. And then every delivery, you have this paper invoice, and you have to enter that into your point of sale system. And that was like the first annoying job I was given at this liquor store I was working at. And like the first day I was doing it, I was spending 3 hours. I spent like 3 hours doing manual data entry. And I went back to first principles and was like, what is something that's not going to be done this way in like 2 to 5 years? And it felt like very obvious. And so the first product that we actually built was just a receiving tool that automated invoice receiving. So taking those paper documents, translating it into something that we could run through AI, and then doing like human in the loop automation where it's like, here's the data of what you're receiving, send that to your inventory, edit, et cetera. And so we started with what was actually a point solution, and leading into like why we tackle platform, which we can talk about, is we found that like running a point solution in this industry was like incredibly difficult to scale. And we got to about like 20 customers just around New York using this receiving tool. And once we found that it was like really difficult, like it even made it difficult for us to add value at this point solution. We had like 6 or 7 customers just come to us like proactively, and we're like, hey, if you guys, they're like, build a point of sale system and like, we'll do it with you guys. We don't like what we have. And so we didn't set out. We actually were intimidated by building a platform at first for the risks you were saying. It's like a bunch of features. There's a lot to build, the switching costs. But because of the complexity we had with running a point solution and like the vote of confidence that we had from some of our early customers, we just like went all in. So we started building the point of sale like 3 months into the company journey.
That's fascinating. I love, this is such an important point, I think, for founders, is you like epitomize dog fooding, the experience and actually going and working in one of the liquor stores. And I can just see you in the interview. The guy's like, why are you interviewing for this job? And you're like, well, I'm very serious about building a solution in this space. So I won't probably be here that long, but like, I'll do a bunch of great work for you. I promise. And you were probably like the best hire 6 months, I assume.
Yeah. Well, it's, I think that whenever we're looking at like outdated industries, whether it's SMB or maybe even something like, like HVAC companies that service the entire city of Chicago, it's like, these are businesses run by entrepreneurs, and it's easy to forget that because all of us like in the laptop class building venture-backed companies, it's like easy to forget that it's like that these are run by business owners that are motivated largely by like the same things we're motivated by. And so they like the energy, and they're like, hey, like maybe this person will come and figure it out and do something that can help my business grow. So there's actually like aligned incentives between like founders like in early stage startups and like some of these older industries where it's like, even if they're like larger scale, and I'm going to keep using HVAC as an example, or even like a regional liquor store chain, it's like they're still run by like one entrepreneur or like a couple of entrepreneurs that keep it all going.
No, totally. I love that. I love that example. So you decide, okay, we're gonna jump into system of record. We're gonna be the POS, be the inventory side of this, and I can just see that in like super micro fragmented, verticals like liquor stores. They just don't. They're already, like you said, they're already spending hours upon hours doing data entry. Like the likelihood of them using multiple kind of SaaS solutions, like they don't want to. They want to use one. I mean, even in big companies, they want to just use one thing. That in most cases, at least. And so what is like the journey between those first 7 customers saying, hey, we'll do this with you, and like actually getting to a place where, hey, we have enough to really like start ramping this versus, hey, let's continue to focus on R&D and this may take a while. Like that's a very like hard balancing act for founders to figure.
It is. And I think that I know what we learned the hard way is that we started out with, we need to build whatever we're told, which really is, it's just, in my opinion, what I've learned is the wrong approach. And what we shifted to, I would say like 10 customers in, what we shifted to is we need to have an identity, because we can't go to market with every customer basically with like a notepad being like, you sign and I take your order. Like
you can't be a custom dev shop for SMBs, right?
No. And ultimately we're all here to move an industry forward. If you're listening to this podcast, you get a specific industry and you're looking to move an industry forward. And like, I think that you have to develop an instinct to understand like, what's the difference between like, this is an ask that if we don't do it, it's a blocker to operations. And therefore it could like cloud the waters or muddy the waters for the value that I'm delivering elsewhere. And then the difference between that, which is like, you probably should build that, versus this is the way things are being done. And it's not a hard requirement. And we can focus on the broader vision and bring our customers into focusing on that broader vision. So the short answer is we made mistakes early on by taking these orders, being the order taker, being the dev shop. And we just found like we didn't feel like we were going fast enough. And we also felt like the product didn't have an identity. It was like, okay, we can go to this store and maybe they will use the same features as the previous store and they now don't have to ask for it. But we don't have something that we can stand on that's like other than, hey, here's a Tailwind version here's like a JavaScript version of your legacy software. It does all the same things. It just like looks nicer. And so I would say like, certainly like we launched our first customer. So we started building Memorial Day weekend in 23, launched our first customer I would say like into September in 23 and launched our second customer a month after that. And we came into the new year in 2024 that year with like a completely different perspective. It was like, we are going to focus on things that help these businesses move forward. And then if we're going to build what we call table stakes features, it has to be a clear blocker to operations. It can't be like a nice to have that doesn't have like a true reason to exist or something that they can't operate without.
So Darren, talk to me a little bit about just kind of the fundraising and the financial situation in the early days. So how did you capitalize the business? Especially kind of I know you've raised some venture now, but like, how do you get this thing off the ground? You got a bunch of people listening that are asking themselves that question right now.
I actually was working at the liquor store while I had a full-time job. So I did that on nights and weekends. And the main reason that there's the obvious reason that I did that, which was, look, I wanted to be able to validate and understand where the opportunities were and still are. But the second thing was like really about de-risking. I mentioned earlier that I've worked at several venture-backed companies, this is a incredibly long journey. And like, I just didn't want to make like the wrong bet on a space that, didn't need what I thought it needed. So we were able to, like, once I left that experience working at the liquor store, we were able to like operate with a real degree of precision, because it was like, this is the pain I experience. This is what my peers at the store experience. This is what the owner experience. And then I could go and more confidently talk about like problems that I experience and validate that with other store owners across the country. And so we built that point solution I was talking to you about and rode that for like 6 months. And then we did apply to YC in 2023 and went through their summer batch. And so that funding, and we did a small pre-seed after that, like really gave us the foundation to be able to like go into building the platform. Because I think if we would have been able to stay focused on like one feature that we do really well, we definitely could have bootstrapped that longer. And I hesitate to say that like we even bootstrapped Sante at any point, because it was like 6 months, there wasn't like real pain being inflicted on us personally of like, we didn't go like that long without being paid. And like, it was just a couple of us. But I think that once we moved into building out a platform, not only do you have to be feature rich, but also like the uptime requirement is very considerable, like I want to say that like Brex had an outage like last year or a couple of years ago. And, I'm sure that caused a lot of pain, but like you can go sometime without logging into your Brex account, or, like an email, like automation tool can go down for a period of time. And it's like, okay, I can wait until tomorrow to send that campaign. Frustrating, not a big deal. We have stores that are on the platform, like quite literally 17 hours straight, especially like our customers in like LA, California, where it's legal for them to sell alcohol products until like 2-3 in the morning. So we couldn't, there was like not a viable path for us to grow and capitalize on what we believe was like generational, and still is generational, timing in this market, while also bootstrapping. We wouldn't have been able to capitalize on the opportunity. And then also it would have like really put that platform model at risk, because we just wouldn't have had the resources to support the level of like maintenance on the infrastructure to like support growth and make sure that like our uptime is like as close to 100% as possible.
And when did you decide to like, let's dial up we've gotten to enough of a feature base that we're competitive with kind of the Squares of the world or the horizontal solutions, where like, let's really start kind of heavy outbound, in outreach? Like at what point of feature parity did you need to get?
So it was like a start-stop. So I mentioned before, I have a sales background. I hadn't really done SMB sales before founding Sante, but selling is, for the most part, selling is selling. There's not as much like multi-threading here, or as much like going to conferences and things like that. But so in May of 2024 was like the first time that we put our foot on the gas. And that was all led by me. And we found like in onboarding a bunch of customers for the first time, like I think maybe it was like June of 2024, we did like 10 onboards in a month. And compared to doing like no more than 1 or 2 previously, it was like, it was a level that we weren't accustomed to. It was like, wait a second, like we don't have like the onboarding enablement. We don't have like a lot of the features that these stores need. Like that's actually how we like stumbled into some of like the tax regulations. We started to figure out like we launched in Massachusetts without knowing like we needed automatic bottle deposits on anything carbonated. We had like a group go live in Massachusetts, and it's like, we don't support that. So we like went after it in May, reeled it in a little bit. And that was in 2024. And then we went back to mostly founder-led sales for like over a year.
As you just got the product right, you got the regulation right.
Yeah. And so we actually like really put our foot on the gas, I would say like Q3 of last year. And so the way that we've done that is, we've been hiring engineers the whole time. So I would say that like that's just been happening consistently in parallel. We're in New York, 100% in person. And so we've always been adding engineers to the team. We'll always continue to do that. That's just like a steady pace. In parallel, what we started doing, I would say in Q3 of last year, and this is where it was like very clear. We were no longer having to like go back to the drawing board when we would onboard customers. There would no longer be a delay between signature and onboarding because it was like, oh, we need to build a bunch of features. And so last year we onboarded, there's like a big chain here in New York. They're the highest grossing liquor store chain in the entire state. Like they're on Sante. We went live with one of the highest grossing independent locations in California last year. We went live with like a pretty big, like almost like PE-backed group in Massachusetts last year. So I'm referencing 2025 here. And so through those cycles, and I have a bunch of other examples I could give you, that like really pushed us like to getting to like feature parity across like all of our competitors. And so once we started to realize like, wait, we're signing the same size deals, multi-location, single location, big box stores, and there's nothing needed to go live. There's no delay that Sante inflicted or because of a Sante gap. That's whenever it was like time to go and scale up outbound sales. And then when I say outbound sales, I don't mean like door to door. I just mean like cold calling, because we all do that from our office in New York. And then also scaling like post sales as well. So really the observation was we went this like 1.5 to 2 year period. It was like every deal, even small deals, it would be like, oh, we need you to build this. We need you to build that. And going back to what I was saying before, these would be like blockers to operations, like things that were like, damn, like we can't not do that, or we won't get the deal, or we won't be able to scale in this market. And so once it was just like, it was almost like a fog was lifted over the business. It was like, wait a second, like we closed like 30 deals last month and none of them had any feature requests. And yeah. And so that's like really unleashed us. And so now it's like, we are now like, we can call any state, any store. I don't care how many locations you have. I don't care if you sell food. I don't care if you sell weighted items. I don't care if you sell CBD, THC, don't care. We can support it. And so now we can go and plug in sales reps and we can say like, here's the playbook. Here's how you should talk to stores by state. And within that state, if there's nuances to like municipalities or counties, here's how you treat that. And it's like very repeatable. So it's like, we just hit that like on-ramp to like time to scale. And it's like a super exciting time now because we have a team of like 6 account executives and 3 BDRs. And like we went from what was, like a peak month, maybe closing like 20 to 30 deals in a month. Now, like we're doing that like for each rep each month. So 6 times over. And while it was a painful process to get there, I think that what did work in our strategy is like, now it's like very easy to plug people in who are, if you're hungry and you want it, it's like the playbook works and you can close any deal that you come across.
I love that. It's a salesperson's dream. So one part I want to double click on is you didn't dig into it all, kind of the customer retention aspect, like on that kind of fog being lifted. Like what's the customer retention angle to that fog being lifted as well? Because I assume at some point, you probably had some like early churn because of product stuff, like we all go through. What did that look like in terms of, hey, it's not just we can sell this and they're not asking for more things, but like, hey, we're not having fall off post sale because of, whatever.
Yeah. So I think it's a great question. I'm actually interested to get your perspective on churn in the early stages, because I have like what may be viewed as a hot take. But so going back to like what I've mentioned a couple of times, like these stores are using Sante for everything. They're using Sante for the in-store point of sale. They sell online. This is how they manage their delivery apps. That's how they market to their customers. That's how they do loyalty, gift cards. That's how they do everything back office, from like employee management, distributor management. So while there's like downside to that, the downside is that like there's a pretty big like replacement or switching cost, if you will. The upside is that like it's a pretty big pain to leave Sante. And we're super motivated to move people off, and we've built a bunch of internal tooling to make it easier to switch to Sante. But we do have like an inherent retention driver built into the business model. So I want to be clear about that. The retention's always been good. Right now we're just over 95% retention. But I think that the difference that we've seen with like because there was like a direction and message market fit for a long time, where it's like we're being pulled, but it's like the product's not there where you could say like, sales rep, go call this list and go hit your quota, and that for sales guys, that's like the true measurement, and I think that what we've seen, maybe not necessarily a boost in retention, because that retention rate is already pretty high, is we're seeing more referrals now. And so we had a pretty competitive deal recently that we won. Customer goes live, we get introduced to a group, and that's like, now we've got 20 intros from this one customer. Whereas before it was a lot of like, I'm sticking with Sante probably because like they're building really fast. What they do is very, very good, if not great. And I'm betting on that they're going to catch up to what I need. To now it's like, we're not working as closely with every single one of our customers. There's no one's like a design partner. No one's like helping us validate. So now it's like, here's the product, you like it, and we get introduced to like more people within their network. But one thing I am curious about, I want to get your perspective on something with churn. So when you were running Portico back in the day, like, what was your perspective on the relationship between rapid growth and churn? Because like, if we're talking about like, you're finding PMF, you find PMF, and then like you're trying to scale while also like you should be still under resourced. Like your resources should be catching up to where you find that ceiling is. Like what was your comfort level with increasing churn as you increase growth velocity? Or was it like, no, I'm not compromising at all. I want to maintain the same churn rate as before while also like 10xing year over year.
All right, we're going to take a short break to give a big shout out to our sponsor, Paraffin. They're the ones who make verticals possible. If you haven't heard of Paraffin, go check them out. They build embedded finance tools that really help your merchants grow. They're the leader in vertical software and embedded finance. And so if you're building in the space, haven't explored Paraffin yet, go check them out. They've got embedded credit, embedded spending, a lot of different tools to really drive revenue growth, drive TAM expansion, and really improve retention. So big shout out to Paraffin. Go check them out. Now back to the episode. Yeah. So first, I love the, I'm going to poke fun at it. The back in the day, I feel old now. It was 2020. No, I'm just messing with you. Yeah. So it's a super hard question, and it like took me a lot of time to at least come to an opinion on it. So I eventually got to the point, like for the longest time, I was just growth at all costs. Like I was just we were mostly mid-market enterprise. We weren't doing a lot of SMB. And my view was like, let's get in the door. Let's do our best not to overpromise. And then like, we'll catch up before there's real churn risk. I think as we went multi-product, the con of that approach was specifically in vertical software is like, I had 1,000 trade schools in the US, like roughly that I had. And so the problem with it is it actually hurt us on cross-sell and expansion into multi-product stuff. It hurt us on, everyone would talk to everybody in our industry. Like there was multiple trade shows we went to, and like, they'd be like, yeah, those guys are great, but like the product isn't quite there yet. And so in the sales process, we get like, hey, yeah, like we're going to hold off a little bit until, we've heard it's good, but it's not like where we necessarily need it to be because we're bigger or whatever. We're more complex. And so I basically like sat with the team literally every quarter and created this chart. And I've written about this a little bit, but this chart was basically like customer churn risk. And we'd score every single product on this. Customer churn risk was one bucket. Then it was like customer tolerance, which meant that they weren't going to churn, but they weren't going to go tell, their friends to buy it. And then there was like customer happiness / referral. And we like, very intellectually honestly, like from the seller to the customer success person, to the product person, to me, to like a few key constituents that just knew the product set in and out, would like go through that deep exercise every single quarter. And the goal was to basically not move on to building anything new until the product got to that middle bucket where they weren't going to turn off. We would then move to a net new product, right? Because we were very much like an expansion driven kind of cross sell business. But we'd still focus on that product until it reached customer happiness, just not at the specific volume or rate that we were. So it was like a lot of resources going in to get the product to kind of that middle bucket where they weren't going to churn, and then still resources, but limited getting it to the customer happiness bucket. You could answer that question to a bunch of people and they'd all answer it a lot of different ways. Like Apple, for example, doesn't really shit until it's like, well, this might have changed in the last couple of years, but when Steve Jobs is running, is like, we don't really shit until it's like peak customer happiness, right? And that's like a luxury that you get as you become bigger and bigger. That's how I approached it. Do you do something similar?
Yeah, I think that whenever you're focused on a specific vertical, word of mouth and reputation matters a lot. And this is not to say that, horizontal or generic software or AI solutions reputation doesn't matter, but it's if you're a founder, you probably have other friends who are founders and you probably have other friends who are VCs. It's like, it's the same in the industry that you're selling to. And I think you have to be really careful, not just about churn, but you also have to be really careful with making sure that your customer is always educated on how to use the product properly and like features that are coming that you're releasing. Because small things so our framework is not like the exact same as yours, but very similar. And like, we're basically always optimizing. It's like we have to optimize out of the churn risk. Like the number one priority is get out of the churn risk category or the churn risk, like emotional state. And then we have the ability to sell other products or offer more value. If you've got too many customers or an important customer in the churn risk state, and you go and you're like, hey, I have this agent that can handle employee scheduling for you, they're going to be like, yeah. And they also like, it'll come across as out of touch to them. So I think we share a similar framework, but to add on to it, like I was saying, is like something that we learned early on. Like we had like this really small, we had like 20 customers, and we were in a deal in the city. This was like when most of our stores were like wine shops in Manhattan. And like someone had said something, like one of our prospects had said something that was like, we clearly did, and we had been doing since day one. It was like a feature. It was like a table stakes feature. It was like part of the first release. They're like, yeah, we went and talked to customer ABC, and they said that you guys don't do XYZ. And it's like, that on its own is like, it's like, that's a poor education of customers on how to use the product, because people are going to go and pick up the phone and be like, hey, I heard that you were using them. And they could go and be like, hey, all these things are great. And they could say like, but like whatever, like they don't allow you to do customer level discounts. I'm making something up. And then that could be all the prospect hears is they're like, because while going back to like these small business owners, like we're always like, oh, they're outdated, legacy, fragmented. It's like they're entrepreneurs. They make money. They're not idiots. Like they know that we're startups. They know that we're figuring it out. And what they may not be technical, but they're trying to understand, like, are they ready to service my business? Am I going from Square, a $40 billion market cap, to Sante, a company that like maybe like 2,500 people on planet Earth have heard of? Can I trust them? And not only like misunderstanding how a feature works or whether or not you have something, it's not just that on its own. It could be like a signal to them that like you're not ready, because a platform or a provider that's ready would have these things like in spades. And so beyond like monitoring for churn, we are also like very, very serious about making sure that our customers are educated on how to use existing features, and that it's like very clear that they're kept up to date on new features that come out, so that when we're not in the room, we're minimizing the likelihood that they're like, Sante doesn't do this thing. And it's like, actually, we just invested like 3 months of engineering resources to like do that and more. And that's a reason to switch to Sante.
I think that's a great point. It's a great point. The one other thing I'd add too is I got to the point where it was really the product manager or the head of the product's job to only release products at that middle bucket stage, right? Where they weren't in churn zone. And I don't think I kept a high enough bar on that at least in the early days. And so like a product manager really shouldn't be releasing a product until it's out of the churn bucket. That's the only other thing I would add. Like if it gets released before that, then there's a problem with requirements and mapping and building the right thing. That's only one piece I'd add.
Wouldn't you say, because it definitely makes sense, and I would in general agree with you. Wouldn't you say that that's also like in line with like being careful about like your reputation in your specific vertical too?
100%. 100%. It's in vertical SaaS, it's like one of the most important things because you don't have like another market to fall back on, right? And so word of mouth is huge. I've got some pain from that for sure. So we got a couple minutes left here. I want to switch gears quickly because you're a sales guy by background. I want to talk about like your GTM motion because I think you've done really well here, and it feels like you've gotten it right, kind of out of the gates, which is super rare in VSaaS. Like there's so many companies that are constantly like tweaking and iterating, kind of on the GTM, and so like what was your approach? Like what's working? How should other founders like think about it? Like how did you tweak and iterate?
Well, to start with that, like I come from an enterprise sales background. And so most of the big deals I've closed in my career have been, I've booked a meeting through email or through an intro from somebody in my network, or, like the company I'm working for, maybe like an investor makes the intro. And so a lot of like the prospecting and like building pipeline, like what is that I have experience or had experience in was just like completely not applicable because one, like getting contact data for liquor store owners and wine shop owners is like very, very difficult. I mean, maybe you can get their cell, maybe you can get their email, but you certainly like couldn't rely on that. And so when we started looking at, or really whenever I started looking at go-to-market, going back to like the same like first principle of like validating early product is like thinking more from the customer. It's like, all right, 90% of these guys or 90% of these people are independent business owners. And so like maybe they're not at the store all the time, but they're reachable at the store. And so we have focused very much on cold calling the store and finding out when the manager or the owner is going to be available. And I tried a bunch of different things before getting to that. Like I tried like the networking. We had contracts, and we still do, with sales reps at different distributors who give us intros. I went to a couple of conferences, which like we're not like shutting the door on any of that. We found that it wasn't enough. And so I actually, because of, those things that didn't scale at the degree that we needed them to, I just started picking up the phone and found that was like the easiest way to reach people. And I actually hired a cold calling coach probably like a year ago. And I had done some cold calling earlier in my career, but it had been a while. And like, I didn't do it for like a long period of time. And so I hired this coach and like basically like for a year wrote a cold calling playbook. And I think that the mindset really was like all the fundamentals, or the mindset has all been about like, number one, like how do we get in touch with this customer consistently? Like how do we have as much control as possible in getting in touch with this buyer? And like, that's clearly the phones. Like you show up at the store, it's super time consuming. Maybe they're not there. Like then you just wasted an hour. Whereas like picking up the phone, hey, when are they going to be there? 2:00? Great. Then I call back. And then the second thing is that like we're in business to dominate this market. And that's like a little like testosterone-y to say, but like we're trying to get like mind-body-esque market share in liquor stores. So like MindBody's got like what?
70%.
Yeah. They're like 60%. And I think it's possible because one, like, but the things I was saying, like behind the scenes, like if you sell the liquor stores in Nashville, Tennessee, they all know each other. They all know each other in New York and Boston, what have you. So it seems like what I always say is like, it's fragmented at the front door, but it's interconnected at home. So these people all know each other. And so if we're trying to go after aggressive scale, we need to be able to book like 5 meetings per day per rep. Like we can. And realistically, we look at it as So our funnel is conversations and meetings. And so we're basically looking at like each rep should be having at least 20 conversations a day. 20 conversations is dialogue back and forth with a potential buyer. And that should result in, I would say on the low end, 3 meetings booked a day to 5 meetings booked a day. And so if you're trying to pursue scale, you have to think about like, you do all this stuff to get to PMF that like doesn't scale. And I believe in all of that, and I did some door-to-door stuff. I attended some conferences. We built some features that were for individual customers. But then whenever you're like, we need to go fast, we need to go and do 50 to 100 onboards a month, that all then becomes about like, what can you have repeatable for people outside of the company to come in and do consistently? And like, we just found that like the phones work, our scripts work, and it's not difficult to get these liquor store owners on the phone. And I think that's one part.
Is it difficult to get them on a Zoom? Is it difficult to show them the product?
It's difficult to get them to turn on their camera, like,
okay.
But like if you're a sales rep and you are cool with selling to a blank screen, I think you're fine. The no-show rate was a problem in the early days of me cold calling. But again, this is like, I did this for like a year on my own. And so a lot of like the trials and tribulations were worked out before we started hiring salespeople. And so now it's just like, we don't consider it a meeting without the person's personal phone number. And we do a bunch of different things to increase the likelihood that they show up. And this doesn't mean that it's 100% show rate. I want to be clear about that. But it's not like a problem to the degree that it was even 6 months ago. And that's just because it's like, we get their phone number, we text them immediately after, here's the calendar link, the morning of, here's the link to the dial. And the most likely, or at least like the easiest thing for them to do is to click the link on their phone. And that's, sometimes that happens and they're not viewing the demo on a full screen, which of course you would prefer it to be on a full screen, but just minimizing the likelihood that they don't show. Like,
yeah, you gotta meet them where they are. They are. That's the only way to do it. That makes sense. It's fascinating.
So I think like the summary is like, big fan of the phones, at least in this space. And I'm curious for you, like, how are you getting into the trade schools?
Yeah, we were very much kind of mid-market enterprise, like feet on the street. And so the pros of that were like 100K ACVs, right? Really high retention. The cons of that were like very long multi-stakeholder sales cycles. And so, as I've reflected, and this is good for new founders too, is like, as I've reflected on where can you really build like a massive intra-scale company, it's very hard to do it if you're serving mid-market and enterprise customers at a rapid pace. And the only like public players that we've seen that serve mid-market enterprise customers have crazy ACVs, like massive, like 400 or 500K. I mean, I think Palantir's like north of $1 million. So it's got to make sense. And like, we went the private equity route because we just fell off the venture track because our ACVs were 100K. And it was just like, we tried everything to accelerate, 18-month sales cycles down to 12, down to 6. And like, sometimes it happened, but they really stuck around that 12-month mark. And so I think, SMB can be your friend as long as you can kind of solve the retention problem. And it feels like you guys have, which is phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's, with any size deal that you're working, like there's upsides and downsides. I think like the ACVs are the clear upside with enterprise. And you also get like more sophisticated buyers. So it's like they're buying more with like better fundamentals, like the value that it's driving. They're often less emotional about it. The upside of SMBs that I've found is that like our sales cycles we went like 42 days, 35 days. Right now we're at 23.5 with a couple of our sales reps doing less than 18 days. Like I think that getting it below like 18, 19 days is going to be pretty difficult at average across like an entire team. But the thing is like, yes, these deals are smaller, but a ramped rep should be able to close 10 to 15 of them a month. And the ARR that they're delivering is either at par or above what what you could do at like a mid-market or enterprise company. And a strategy that we've taken is, and this is not to say that we're not open to people with different levels of experience, but like we've gone and hired a bunch of like hungry sales reps who are probably pretty early in their career. Maybe they've done a few, 1 to 3 years of selling. They've been President's Club at another software company servicing either like SMBs or a specific vertical. And so they're familiar with the phones, they're familiar with the velocity, but they haven't been in an environment where it's like you can close at this clip. Like we're post PMF. There's like true greenfield in front of us. Like you can go and close a lot of deals. And so the playbook on top of like cold calling and like the scripts that we use is also like the type of people that are coming in and are like seeing that like I could go and have like a massive impact, turn over like a ton of ARR, but doing it through also like a lot of contracts and like getting people at a stage in their career where like both of those things meeting together like is attractive.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is. It's like a salesperson's dream because you're not like sitting around for a 9-month deal to come to fruition and, a lot of different things that can happen. So one last question, and then I want to move to like kind of the final like rapid fire segment here.
Yeah.
I assume the number one objective, so albeit there's a bunch of like legacy solutions and I don't even know if they're liquor store specific or not, or they're just more horizontal, but I assume almost every single person that you sell into has something already, right? And so I assume the number one objection is just like the rip and replace motion. What have you done to overcome that? Like that's a constant battle for everybody that listens to this pod is like when they get to system of record, like, how do you get that customer to actually move off of it? I'd love to just hear like what's worked, what hasn't worked, and any tidbits you have for the founders listening.
So one thing that I should preface this answer with is I'd mentioned before that I believe that we have generational timing in market right now. So there are 5 legacy players in market that are vertical specific. They occupy about 26% of the industry. And all of them have been acquired by PE shops over the last like 24 to 36 months. A couple of them have even been like sunset and are like requiring that their customers like fold into a generic platform. So like you have what's actually like a pretty significant chunk of the market. So over a quarter of the market is like looking, maybe they're not like, yeah, they're shopping. And so when you go back to what I was saying before, it's like fragmented at the door, connected at home. It's like they're telling other people, maybe they're not using those recently acquired systems, but they're going and being like, well, I'm shopping. Here's who I'm talking to. So it's created a lot of momentum. It's created a lot of like curiosity, piqued interest. So that's one thing I want to mention. Like we have that tailwind. And I believe that like, that's something that you can't really found a startup searching for. Like, I think that timing is like the fleeting thing that like, if you have it, it's like hold on to it because you may be at 2 or 3 other startups the rest of your career that are successful that don't have that. And like, it sounds like we have that right now, but to answer, so we have that benefit. At the same time, we haven't like talked much about AI here, which maybe for some people will be like refreshing, but not only are we using it like in the user-facing product and delivering a lot of value there, we're like really focused on using it in internal tooling. And so I'll give you an example. We switched from like 6 to 8 legacy systems. 5 of those are industry specific. There's another handful that are pretty common and generic. So like we've built what's essentially their agents that either go into the system and extract the data on our behalf and then translate it into our schema and upload that into like a Sante account. And so like something that like we use in the sales cycle, like we were in a competitive deal recently that we won, and then it led to a bunch of intros. Even before we still haven't even gone live with this customer. It led to a bunch of intros to their group. And one of the stores in this group is on one of these like legacy systems that we switch from a lot. And on this demo, they're like, oh, like we're really concerned about switching. It seems like this is a big step up. And so I'm just like, can I send you a file and you put that in your computer and I'll show you how this works. They drop a file into their server. It puts a bot in there and then it extracts all the data. And then it's like, now we have all this data formatted for Sante. And like literally in a demo, I can be like, here's your Sante account with everything from your current system. in Sante. It could be 10 years of history, 15 years of history, doesn't matter. It can be loyalty points, gift cards, customer sales history, all these different things. And so like AI has also unlocked the opportunity, not just like the opportunity for us to like charge more and offer more value and deliver a product that like works on behalf of our customer. It's also allowed us like, we're onboarding at an incredibly high clip with what is actually a really small post-sales team. And that's because every onboard, like we're supplementing that with either scripts or agents that go and like handle a lot of the repetitive work for us so that we're focused more on like relationship building, the human to human aspect of like, do you understand how this works? And so that has really, really helped us with minimizing the fear and like the apprehension to switch, because we can show people quickly like how easy it is to switch, but because like the data is the most important thing. And so while the number one reason that people don't switch is complacency, we have internal tools that we've built to counter that.
That's so awesome. I hadn't really thought through the AI use case or the agent use case around like supporting internal tooling and integration for rip and replace, and that's so money. I love that. Okay, let's move to rapid fire. So like 1 to 2 sentence answers, and we'll have a little bit of fun here. 10 years from now, what does the company look like?
Sante's at like 60% market share.
How big is it
at that point? So we'd be targeting like a pretty significant increase in ACVs by then, which we're factoring in like fintech and AI at that point. But with 50 to 60% market share, I mean, you're looking at like a $12 to $13 billion company at that point. So we're looking for domination in the liquor store space. And I mean, you could go look at like any of our competitors. Like all of our competitors are like writing blogs about us. They're going and like sending their engineers to see like how we build products. So like we are like not just like the front runner on growth velocity, but also on the product side. So like we have like we believe we have like a lot of reason to feel confident that if we could keep doing what we're doing and continue executing well, that we're going to be the de facto system in this space. At the same time, I believe there are adjacent markets as well. Convenience is a $220 billion market. And I'm talking about convenience stores without gas pumps. And then independent grocery is a $250 billion market. All of these operate very similarly to liquor stores. It's like high velocity sales, thousands of products in stock, navigating age verification and different categories and subcategories, delivery, shipping, all those things that like we already do. Nuances, of course, that we'd have to accommodate for, especially if we handle grocery. But I'd say 10 years from now, we are the player in liquor stores. We're like synonymous, like what Slices with pizza shops or Squires with barber shops. We're that for liquor stores. And then I would say that we are a name brand with like a lot of potential and like grocery and convenience.
I love it. Very cool. What hardest moment building so far?
This is supposed to be the rapid fire part, I mean, look, it's so much harder than you could ever imagine. I think that I'm just going to like generalize something. I think getting used to things not going as expected and how often that happens is been the hardest part. And like, it takes a long time. Like now it's like, I do things to counter that. And then also like, I've got the calluses and it's like, I have like a playbook for being able to like iterate and adapt pretty quickly. But I would say like, I'm going to answer more generally. And it's just getting used to like things not going
pulling up
as expected. Even whenever you put in you're like, I worked my ass off, like it should go right. I mean, it just doesn't sometimes.
Yeah. Most like underrated role in at a company, like at a vertical SaaS company that people don't talk about a lot or write about a lot. That's like the true needle mover for the business.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to talk about startups. I really think that, so we don't call customer success at Sante. We call it customer experience. And it's like a small nuance, but we're trying to move away from like the traditional customer success model, which is like, like QBRs, hybrid support, like maybe you should buy this, maybe you shouldn't, like that type of thing, where it's more like we want people who are like at least somewhat technical. Like everybody on our customer experience team right now has a CS degree. And so like they can write code, they can write tickets, they can supplement what like a PM could potentially do. And so maybe other companies wouldn't call it the same way that we do, but I would say like post-sales, customer success, customer experience. You could even like at like bigger enterprise companies call it like the FDE role. I think that you're really like, it's the in-between, like at the early stage, you're not going to have a bunch of PMs. So there's not a bunch of PM roles to have at like the seed and Series A stage. And so like those, like the quantity of those roles are so limited. It's like you can get a lot of the exposure that you would want out of a PM role being in like a post-sales role where you're working closely with sales because sales reps need the deals to go live so they can get paid. And then you're working closely with engineering to be able to deliver feedback throughout implementation, 6 months down the road, et cetera, to like helping inform the product roadmap. So I'm personally like, I'm always coaching young people, like go take like a post-sales role at a startup. If you don't want to sell and you're not technical enough to write code, or you don't know if you want to commit to writing code, it's in between. And it's like, it's just as important as engineering and sales is, at least at Sante.
Yeah, I'm such a big believer in the CS. Like I think a lot of CEOs should be like, the natural flavor has always been sales kind of focused CEOs or some combination product engineering focused CEOs. Like that's the typical flavor. I think there'd be so many better businesses if you put a customer success leader in as CEO. I think it's a highly underrated skill set for sure. All right. Well, I think you'll like this. I want to end on this. This is back to like everything is just fine. You're constant getting used to the pain. This like epitomized my journey. So I thought you could relate.
I think the one thing I will say about the pain is that you also realize like how much of a privilege it is to be a founder, to have investors bet on you, to have employees bet their career on you, and then like your customers bet on you, and then obviously that's like scaling out to like betting on your team. It really is a privilege, and it's like in life, in business, upsides and downsides to everything. Every decision has upsides and downsides. And it's like the downside of being a founder and, even like focusing on a vertical, you talk about like, you have no other space to fall back on. It's like, you have to be really careful with your reputation, really high expectations. There's a lot of pressure and things don't go well. And it really sucks when they don't go well. The flip side though is it's great being able to service all the cohorts of people that bet on you. And it's a very, very rewarding journey. It's one that I wanted to do since I was like in high school. I didn't know I was going to be like a tech founder. Like I grew up in a small town in Mississippi, but I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And so even in like the hardest of times, it's like, this is overall, like, this is like as good as it gets. Like, I'm always like, these are the good old days, man. We're writing the good old days right now.
Pressure is a privilege, right? 100%.
It is. It is.
Well, Darren, thanks so much for being here, man. It means a lot. I appreciate you hopping on. It's a sneaky big market. And so I'm super excited to see what you guys will do. And thanks for sharing all the learning so far. It's been badass.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you. It's been a good conversation and I'll keep tuning in.
All right. Cool. All right. Well, thanks for tuning into Verticals, everyone. That was a fun episode. A lot of interesting topics that I hadn't really thought about. Specifically, the leveraging AI to help with offboarding your legacy competitor products, and it seems like he's been able to do that dramatically and in a very quick fashion. So that was a fun episode. I appreciate everyone being here as always, and we'll see you next week.